Welcome to this episode of The Arena. My name is Greg Sindelar, and today I'm joined by my good friend, former TPF board member, and Longhorn, which is maybe partly why I'm wearing burnt orange today, Senator Kevin Sparks. Senator Sparks, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I do feel like I have to explain why I'm wearing burnt orange. I was maybe foolish in believing too much in my Aggies and lost a bet to Governor Abbott about the game in November. And you so admired this. I said, you know what, Senator, I'm going to wear it just for you to match your bow tie.
Almost a requirement, but I do appreciate the fact that you held up to your end of the bet. So that's admirable.
Yeah.
I know how painful it is.
If he would have forgotten, I would have been okay with that, but he didn't.
No?
Yeah. I saw him a couple weeks ago, and the first thing he said to me is, "You're going to look so good in burnt orange." So we'll see. The purpose of this podcast, Senator, is just to kind of understand how people got involved in public life the way you have. And so maybe the place to start is to kind of go all the way back. Tell me a little bit about your background growing up. Obviously, we already covered you went to University of Texas, but how you ended up deciding to run for office.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say it goes all the way back to, the fact that my parents have always been informed and active in politics. Mm-hmm. And, they've been engaged in our community. My dad was on the school board when I was a kid. They were active in, political campaigns. They actually helped in Tom Craddock's first campaign.
Oh, really?
Which, way back in the 1900s.
The 1900s.
And so just seeing that, in our family, there's a picture actually, Ernest Angelo,
yes,
another TPF board member. There's a picture of myself and my two brothers. So I've got an older brother and a younger brother. We're in our Halloween costumes, and we're hanging door hangers for Ernest Angelo, I think when he ran for mayor of Midland, Texas.
It's incredible.
And so, that's kind of where it started. Boy Scouts kind of reinstilled this idea of patriotism, and they have merit badges that's about community government, national government, our citizenship in the world, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And honestly, I really believe our school systems back then taught more about civics.
Yes.
And so, it's just something that I've always felt like that we had a responsibility to do. Then, at some point in time, Jill and I both were invited to get engaged in TPP. Well, I guess before that, I was part of, I got asked to be a part of the Lyceum, which is, a Texas group of younger folks, bipartisan, to learn about.
Good friend Skipper Dipple. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
All things about the state. I went through a leadership Midland class, to learn more about all of the workings at the community level. Then Jill and I got involved in TPPF, and I'm very thankful that my wife Jill has also shared that burden and that passion to try and make sure that we're doing all we can to keep Texas, Texas.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, over a lot of years as TPPF grew, it's encouraging for us to show up to the policy summit every year, because you tend to get beat down, out in your community with all of the things that are going wrong.
Yep.
It was encouraging to come here and be around like-minded folks and see that, yes, there are still plenty of people that believe like we do in limited government and, taking responsibility for your own actions and all those kinds of things. So that's kind of where that grew. And then I got approached by some conservative minded friends that asked if I would be willing to run for state senate. And said,
and when you're done laughing, what did you?
They basically said, if you'll consider doing this, we'll help with all the work and spread the burden. And so, our youngest of 4 kids had gone off to college, and it didn't take us but a couple of days to go, but this is probably something we ought to do.
Yeah. Well, and it's important, right, that your wife Jill, who is a force of nature in her own right, and you all are truly a dynamic duo of sorts.
I tell people all the time, my district's 45 counties and incorporates most of the Panhandle, and just about everywhere I go, if Jill is not with me, first question I get asked is, "Where's Jill?" So,
you know where you stand on the pecking order, people.
I do know, right?
Yeah, probably your own parents are that way too, right? I know that in my own family. If I show up and they're like, "Where's Katie?" I'm like, "Well, she's doing this or that." They're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, you're just stuck with me."
That is. So early on in my marriage, my folks just told me, if you guys have marriage problems, you better figure it out because we're siding with Jill.
Yeah, that's good advice.
So,
well, if we know anything, you obviously have good judgment because you picked Jill. So you got approached and you ran and you had a very successful campaign, very large district. Tell me what it was, what you learned most from campaigning, because it's such a large district that you had to cover.
Yeah. So it's the first time I had helped with campaigns before. I'd done some door knocking. I'd helped put up signs, help raise money. So all of those things, except be the guy in the chair. And I can tell you my time with TPPF helped tremendously because, I'd already formulated most of my thoughts on the significant issues from a policy standpoint. Yeah. And honestly, Jill and I really felt like we were doing our part, contributing to candidates, being a part of TPPF, helping craft conservative policy and all of that. So it was kind of a surprise when we got asked to run.
Yeah.
Because we really felt like we were doing our share, but evidently God felt like we needed to do more of our share. And so, but it did help prepare me for, fielding questions and going to candidate forums.
Yeah.
Because I had already determined kind of the basis for why I believe the things I believe. A lot of times I think candidates go in, they've got opinions, but they haven't sufficiently thought through why they come up with that opinion.
Yeah.
And, I could trace most of my values all the way back to, either what I believe as a Christian, a lot of what our founding fathers had written, and those principles that, here in Texas, we hold so dear.
Yeah. Yeah. Those first principles that, it's just part of being Texan. It's kind of in our DNA, especially part of Texas that you're from. But you do kind of have a diverse and very broad, as I said, district. You go all the way up to Amarillo, the Panhandle,
to the top of the Panhandle,
tippy top
yes,
of the Panhandle, where they probably look at you like, "Who's this guy from Midland coming out here?" But tell me a little bit about what it's like having such a large district, and maybe some of the issues that you find are so important to your district, and especially if it's something that maybe you wouldn't have expected based on just what you had been doing in Midland.
Yeah. So, it's very interesting. As I look back, God, through my whole life, but certainly my career, has kind of helped me gather the tools that I've needed to represent these folks. So my grandparents were both from the Panhandle. And so growing up, I'd go to family reunions up in Spearman and Sunray. And so I knew about, what happened up in the Panhandle. Yeah. I'd go spend time with them. They lived in Amarillo. I'd spend time with them in the summer, and we'd go up to the family farm north of Sunray. My grandfather was from the Spearman Groover area, and so very familiar with the people up there. Then in the 90s, on the oil and gas side, we purchased some properties up there, and those oil and gas wells were my responsibility. And so I actually, spent time up there chasing pulling units and doing oil and gas work.
Oh,
And, still had relationships from folks that I'd worked with up there. In fact, quick side note, shortly after Jill and I met, I went and had to spend a week up in the Panhandle. I was actually staying in Spearman. And I wrote that this was, way back before cell phones or anything else, back in the 1900s. I wrote her a letter on the Nurse-a-Nickel Motel in Spearman, Texas.
oh wow.
And dropped it in the mail to her. And so anyway, I kind of already knew the kind of people that were up there.
Mm-hmm.
They're good West Texas people, just
Yeah.
like we have in the south part of the district. Same values,
Yeah.
same interests. They're not looking to government really to fix all their problems, which
Yeah.
is a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah, when I go out there, I always tell people it's nice to leave Austin and come to Texas, and which is living in Austin is always a little bit of a you talk about needing encouragement, right? I need encouragement every day, and that's why I'm so lucky to be at TPPF. But the values that you see, that kind of spirit where they're not looking for government to solve their issues, and they're looking to just have the freedom to do things that is in the best interest of them and their families and their communities, which is very important.
Yes.
To all of them. That is to me the heart and soul of Texas, and I think most people, if you live in a big city, you just don't get to experience that. And so if you can go out there and experience what these communities are really like, I think you'd be just overwhelmed with almost like Texas pride.
It is, and somehow in our larger communities, we oftentimes lose a lot of that sense of community.
Yes.
And so when we had the wildfires up in the Panhandle about this time last year, you could just see it. Those people, while it was terrible, all of those communities, whether they were affected by it or not, were pulling together to help every way they could.
Yeah. Yeah. It's truly remarkable. And they understand. That's why, I tell people I'm a conservative because at the heart of being a conservative is community.
Yes.
And it's something that's really understood in communities across your district. All right. So kind of moving forward, you ran, you have this massive district, very, very unique. You were successful. You went to the Senate. What did you learn? Like, what was some of the unexpected things that you're like, man, I had no idea that now maybe this session you're prepared for, where last session which was your first, you were, maybe a little surprised by.
Well, I would say, developing relationships with other senators and other House members,
Yeah.
It has been good. The fact that my first session, we had 4 specials and an impeachment trial gave me extra time. We went into extra innings,
Yes.
and it gave me a lot more time to
Going
get to know
and going and going.
to get to know other legislators. Would not have been my first choice.
Yeah, that part-time job really stretched out, right?
Yeah, that's really misrepresented, I think. But coming from the business side, and especially small business, I understand the value of relationships and what it means to be able to get things done. And I'm not sure everybody values that around the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly see it as a huge component of being able to work together and understanding people to the point of, even if you disagree with them, you kind of know their heart.
Yep.
And it makes it easier to try and find ways to work together on issues.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised sometimes who you end up agreeing with on certain issues. Yeah.
Yep. That's very true.
Yeah. And so obviously you have a oil and gas energy background. One of, I think, the biggest issues that we look at in the state is how do we ensure that our grid remains reliable and affordable, and especially as we grow. We're adding so many people, 500,000 people to the state a year. If we're and we might be the most populous state within the next 2 decades. what are some of the things that you think are important for the legislature to address, things that you're looking to address to ensure that we keep our grid affordable and reliable?
Well,
It's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. We've experienced 25 years of federal intrusion, basically, with considerable subsidies that have promoted a lot of intermittent power, and it's been at the detriment of the reliability side of our grid.
Yeah.
And the way things are structured, both wind and solar are first on the grid. And so it makes it really challenging to encourage dispatchable baseload to come in and be built, because it's hard to run your numbers when you don't know how often you're going to be able to run your equipment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so that is something that the legislature is still trying to figure out. How do we overcome? And I've got a couple of bills that I've filed already this session to try and level the playing field. What my team was just talking about that before I came over here. Now that we've kind of seen how leadership in the House looks, whether or not we've even got a chance to discuss that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a critical component. Right now, we're close to 40% intermittent power in ERCOT, which means on really cold, cloudy days and on super hot, still days, we're going to be at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I think we take for granted. Obviously, with Uri, we saw it firsthand of what it could mean. But if we don't continue to work and figure that out and stabilize the grid, then you start worrying about our ability to grow. Same with some of the other infrastructure issues, water,
same thing with water.
Yeah.
It is very similar to that. We're, Senator Perry would tell you that we're probably 20 years behind on getting our water infrastructure in place for the state. But we're going to. He's got a really aggressive plan that we're going to try and tackle this session, and I think we've got a good shot of making good progress for the long-term health of Texas as far as water.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Well, I've known you for a long time. I think most people might not know this about you, but you really care about how we help the most vulnerable amongst us. And so a passion that you and Jill and your whole family has always had is on foster care reform. And in fact, I believe the very first bill you passed was a foster care bill, if I remember correctly.
It was the first bill that I passed, and it passed through the House, and the governor signed it.
Yeah.
And so, and it had to do with demanding a third-party assessment of all of the foster care rules and regulations.
Yep.
Almost 500 pages currently. And you just look at that and you go, this is discouraging people from considering being a part of the foster care system.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm passionate about taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. I'm also passionate about reducing the size and scope of government and becoming more efficient.
Yeah.
And so this bill.
So that bill was going to Doge DFPS, right? Get that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And really, the goal is to kind of get out of the way. And so we're very we're excited about some of the things that we learned in that. Quite a few, actually. And to DFPS's credit, I've been very pleased with how they have handled their side of it. I think it gives us a great chance of paring all of that down to what's really necessary to make sure we're protecting kids.
Yeah.
And a lot of the extraneous things that have been put in over the years, peeling those things back so that we're opening up opportunities to build that team of folks that want to help with foster care.
Yeah, I love that. And do you think there are things that you're looking at this session or maybe in future sessions to continue down that path?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the middle of crafting some bills right now. We're getting close to having those ready to file. Some of we've already filed. A couple of them that I think have a really good chance of. We've got one bill that we're looking at as a potential pilot program for a district that went out for bid and got 0 bids, which to me tells me that there's a flaw in what we're requiring or requesting folks to do. And this is going to give us hopefully another look. It's going to give us a look at another way to handle foster care more at the community level.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so last 2 questions for let you on your way. I'll be respectful of your time. But are there other issues that you're talking to your constituents or your office is looking at that maybe our viewers should be on the lookout for this session of these are the things that we want to make sure we tackle and get ahead of so that we're protecting our especially rural communities. You have a lot of rural communities in your district.
Yes. So one of the things that, I've known for a long time, but I didn't fully appreciate is how little most of the population of Texas understands about rural Texas.
Yes.
This is not just West Texas, but it's East Texas, deep South Texas that's rural.
Yep.
And, 90% of our population lives in metropolitan areas, and so they don't really have a concept of what rural looks like. But when you talk about my district, which is 45 counties, we create a significant part of the revenue for Texas. When you're talking about oil and gas, dairy, cattle, beef, cotton, grains, it's a significant part of the Texas economy, and all of that happens in rural Texas.
Yep.
And there are certain components about life that is expected, and so we've got to make sure that our rural communities are healthy.
Yeah. Well, I think the good news is people are starting to wake up to that, and I think we'll be able to do some stuff on that in this session. And I think you now have a friend and a partner in the new Secretary of Agriculture, the federal side, which I think you'll be able to work with.
Very excited about the prospects of what we're going to see from the federal level, because all of that affects us at the state level.
100%.
So, very exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff happening. All right, last question, maybe the hardest question I'm going to ask. You have such a big district, so it's probably unfair, but if someone's out in your district, where are the places, one, that they should visit and see, and most importantly, maybe, where should we eat?
Well, if you're in the south part of the district, we have crazy good Mexican food restaurants all across the south part of the district. Not that we don't have other cuisine, which is really good, but you just almost can't go wrong anywhere you stop. Obviously, the beef across West Texas is second to none.
Yep. And
so I highly recommend that as well.
Yeah, I've been given and eaten a lot of Midland Meat Company beef. It's pretty phenomenal, and that's just a snippet of the beef that's coming out of that area.
That's right, and of course that beef, it's not just Permian, because those families own cattle up at the Panhandle as well.
Yeah, it's like the cattle actually come from the tippy top of your district.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Senator Sparks, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everything you're doing. And, I remember talking to you when you decided to run for office. And I hopefully, despite all of the challenges of last session or the sessions that never seem to end, you find it extremely rewarding because you're really making a difference. And we're very grateful for your leadership.
Well, Greg, I appreciate that. One of the things that was one of the most challenging things when I decided to run was when I found out that I was going to have to step off the board of TPPF. Really made me sad because I just love the work that you guys do. I love the people. And I can tell you, me and my staff are so appreciative of the assistance that you guys are willing to give on, all kinds of topics. And so You guys are a great partner to the legislature.
Well, we appreciate that. We exist to serve and to make good things happen in Texas. Obviously, you're working on a lot of legislation that will and taking a lot of votes that will. So any way we can be helpful to your office or really any other office, we always want to do. So appreciate those kind words and appreciate you joining us today and appreciate all of y'all joining us on this episode of The Arena. We'll be back with our next episode very soon.